You're listening to Psych with Mike. For more episodes or to connect with the show with comments, ideas, or to be a guest, go to www.psychwithmike.com. Follow the show on Twitter @PsychWithMike or like the Facebook page @PsychWithMike. Now, here's Psych with Mike.
Go.
To be ready.
Always. Be prepared.
I was going to say
Like a
like
Boy
a
Scout.
cowboy, like a Boy Scout.
Like a Boy Scout.
Welcome into the Psych with Mike Library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan, and I am here with Mr. Brett Newcomb.
How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Yeah, so you said goodbye to your kids today.
They first time in a couple of years, I think, that they've gone anywhere.
Yeah.
They've gone for the holiday weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that. I don't know when it's going to be, other than possibly when we give ourselves permission, but when is it going to be time to go on vacations again? I was thinking about that because I was thinking about talking to you about, did you want to go skiing this year? And then I was thinking about, should my wife and I take a trip to Mexico? And then, I think about, okay, well, I don't know what things are going to look like in the spring, and I think things are going to be better. I hope that things are going to be better, but I think they're probably going to be pretty status quo. And I know that you and I are vaccinated. I'm sure that by the time ski season rolls around, we usually go in between January and March. We probably will both have had our third vaccine shots, and yet is it time to go? I mean, should we just say, okay, let's do these things, because it's already been 2 years that we've been on hold. How long are we going to wait? I mean, I don't know what the answers are. Are there answers?
No one does.
Yeah.
It seems to be pay your money, take your choice.
Yeah.
You roll the dice. I think more and more Americans are at the place. I read something just today that said, the pandemic may not be through with us, but we're through with it.
Yeah.
So we're going to start living our lives and start doing things.
It seems like it.
Yeah.
I mean, even places now that have mask signs on the doors, like I generally have a mask with me all the time, and I wear it if I'm in a public place that's indoors, regardless of what the expectations of the venue are. Right. But yet I see maybe now 1 in 6, 7 people wearing masks.
Yeah. Yeah. But you live in a state where less than half the people are vaccinated.
So in other states
where you go in this state, you live
yeah.
near one of the 2 urban centers, so you're more likely to find it. If you go out into rural areas, you're not as likely to find it.
Sure. So I wonder, though. Okay, so I don't want to go too far into this, but like, are you ready to travel? Would you travel today?
I have been traveling for the last year.
But you've been going camping by yourself.
Flown.
Would you get on an airplane and go to Mexico?
No.
Okay.
Not right now.
Yeah. And I'm on the fence. I'm more leaning towards no.
It's not entirely my decision. I mean, I was reading just this week that a number of the European countries are beginning to reconsider whether or not they allow Americans free access because our COVID numbers are as high as they are.
Yeah.
And we've had another surge.
And we've had so little
So you
vaccine.
may make plans and say, well, I'm ready to go to Europe, but Europe may say, well, no thanks.
Right. So. Would you feel comfortable going skiing?
My concerns about going skiing would be whether or not the system in place there was working at reasonable maximum efficiency.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
Did they have the lodges open? Did they have the lifts open?
Mm-hmm.
Was there a place to stop and get a glass of water or a cup of coffee? Because at the beginning, the first winter of COVID, they didn't have any of that.
Mm-hmm.
They had like 6 feet between skiers and the ski lifts. None of the lodges were open. You couldn't get any food. You couldn't get anything to drink. I mean, it just was a much more difficult problem in terms of paying that kind of money to have an outcome that was more restrictive.
But if the amenities were open, you would feel okay doing that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So this kind of dovetails into what I wanted to talk about. I had a new article on some brain connectivity and depression, which obviously is a huge topic in the United States. And I think that depression and anxiety numbers are going to just mushroom over the next couple of years. And I've said for a long time that I really don't think that the effects of the coronavirus on the psychology of the United States or the world are going to be known for several years.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be pretty devastating. And so, this idea of when is it going to be safe to travel, I think is an essential component, at least of my sense of depression or anxiety, because one of the ways in which we control for depression and anxiety is to go on vacation. I mean, that's a self-care.
There are continuing studies being done, and new interpretations of the data coming out. I was having this discussion with my son this morning. He's a computer geek. He's a software engineer for a major company. And he was saying that he isn't particularly concerned about flying today because we're taking him to the airport and we'll pick him up. His friends will pick him up when he gets where he's going. So he's not using public transportation. That the greatest risk factor right now when you fly is using public transportation to go to the airport and then eating or drinking at the airport. Yeah. And he has determined not to eat or drink while he's at the airport.
I did not know that.
On the plane.
But if your son says that, then I believe it because I know he knows a lot about statistics.
Recent research. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. And, now that
but
you say that...
that's a fluid reality. That changes as circumstances change.
Well,
that's where it is today.
Now that you say that, that makes a lot of sense. That where are the bottlenecks in the system? Yeah. And certainly food delivery in the airport, that makes all the sense in the world that that's a bottleneck.
Or crowds. I mean, at the gates. Are people wearing masks even at the gates? Or just when they get on the plane? And do they keep them on while they're on the plane? And what about if they're eating on the plane? They can take them off. So then do they eat really slow and keep them off the whole... You just get all this garbage.
Sure.
Because you got to deal with all other people. Mm-hmm. If you drive your own car, you don't have to do that quite so much. Mm-hmm. But you have to have time to do it. Mm-hmm. I've got a week to drive somewhere. I don't have to go and come back in a week.
Yeah.
So I'm fortunate.
Yeah, yeah.
Being old is a good thing.
I agree 100%.
I recommend it.
I think that being old is a good thing. Now, I'm a little younger than you, but still almost 60. And if somebody offered me the opportunity to be 20 again, there is absolutely no way that I would take that. And I can't imagine how much money you would have to pay me. But it would have to be a significant sum for me to be willing to take that deal.
To go back to 20?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you went back to 20, knowing what you know now, you could make that.
Well, if I could go back knowing what I know, I might be willing to do it. I'm assuming that what comes with that is ignorance.
Oh, okay. So you need more careful examination of the contract.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. But at the same time, that I think there are tremendous advantages in. You and I are in pretty good physical shape and pretty good mental shape. So that's an advantage so being old for us, we feel like is an advantage because it comes along with hopefully knowledge, if not wisdom, right? And I think that to me, if somebody were to ask me, what is the difference between knowledge and wisdom, I would tell them age.
Okay.
Would you agree with that? Or do you have a different...
I don't know. No one's asked me that.
So, for me, it requires a certain amount of life experience to be able to put things in context. And so knowledge doesn't become wisdom until you get older. That's why we don't think of young people as being very wise generally. And so for you and I, because we're in good physical shape and in good mental shape, and we have these life experiences, I think our experience of growing older has been positive. That's not the case for everybody. I'm sure that there are a lot of people who have not felt like growing old has been a positive experience.
There are any number of sadly depressed,
Exactly.
elderly people living alone, waiting to die. In our society, which is more progressive and positive and economically stable than many around the world.
Right.
So it's hard to understand. I know a number of older people that have literally, my next door neighbor recently passed, and she was 95 or 6. And for probably 3 years, she kept saying to me, why won't God let me go? Why won't God take me? I'm ready to go. It's miserable here. And that was her perspective on life.
But she
She had a nice home. She
able
had
to-
relatives.
But physically she was okay, and mentally she was okay?
Until the very end,
Yeah.
the last 6 months maybe not, but
Yeah.
But everyone in her age group had died,
Yeah.
and she was lonely.
That would be rough.
Yeah, I mean, we
Yeah.
made sure that we invited her over for every holiday meal and every social gathering and what have you, and she'd come to some.
Right.
But
But
she,
what was going on any given Wednesday, right? That's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
well, she was still till maybe the last year of her life, she was still driving a car and going to the library once a week and getting romance books. That she liked. She liked to read a lot, and so she did.
And it's really unfortunate, in my opinion, then, that was her experience, because it sounds to me like there was probably a lot of wisdom that she had that she could share. But I think that is a flaw in our society, is we don't respect age in our society. We are a society that is predicated on be young, be virile, and once you are not those things, then you're used up. You're of no good.
Yeah, we don't revere a
Wisdom.
lot. Yeah.
I mean, I guess the only place where we maybe could say that we should be able to expect there to be some wisdom would be in our government, because the people who run the government tend to be older.
Not if you studied government.
But I don't see a lot of it there. So my message is, I would like for people to be able to experience getting older in a less negative way. And, this article that I had sent to you was talking about what are some of the brain structures that might be associated if you have a genetic predisposition for depression, and what is the effect on that. And what the article was talking about is that this might make it harder for you to be able to be connected to people, because you don't have the ability to interpret social messages or signaling as effectively. But I see us doing that to ourselves now in society because of the internets and because of social media.
Yeah, the choices that we make, the options that are presented to us. Although I enjoyed the article that you sent me, because I found this delightful sentence. The researchers found that individuals with a familial risk of depression, compared to the control group, tended to have increased functional connectivity between the ventromedial prefrontal cortex and the nucleus accumbens, left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and subregions of the cerebellum during the social cognition test.
Yeah.
I love reading stuff like that.
Do you know what that pathway is?
Actually, I do.
It's the reward pathway that is associated with the prefrontal. That area of the prefrontal cortex and the nucleus accumbens are the areas that are associated with addiction.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell me sex. But then sex can be an addiction.
Sex, yeah, but it's reward.
Yeah.
So what that says is that these people who are unfortunately suffering in this way probably have a significantly less probability of ever developing an addiction. So while there
unless
is,
they become addicted to depression,
Well, but while there is a negative that's associated with that, there's also a positive.
Yeah. I remember, I always remember the lab rat study that I read about, where they put an electrode into that region of the rat's brain, and they gave him a choice between taking a food pellet or taking a sexual orgasm. And he starved to death, but he died happy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and probably press that button until it killed him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, let's take our break, and we'll come back and we'll talk more about this.
One of the reasons that I want to participate in this show is because it gives me an opportunity to clinically review my understanding of what therapy is and how it works, especially for the consumer. So my hope is that we will find conversations that broaden my understanding of that.
And my hope is that we do that in a way that is useful but also entertaining for people, so that they want to listen, not only because they're getting good psychology information, but because they just enjoy the show.
Easy listening with an informational twist. So
That's a new tagline.
They're not sitting there going, huh?
Easy listening with an informational twist.
I'm really good at this. I'm a professional.
You're a professional. If it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. So right before we took the break, you were coughing.
Aha.
Yeah. Are you okay?
Yeah. Tisn't the cough that carries you off. 'Tis the coughing that carries you often.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I have really devoted my career to is an understanding of empathy. And so a lot of what this article talks about to me is related to empathy. So the ability to relate to other individuals I see as an empathic thing, but empathy and sympathy, the difference between empathy and sympathy is being able to understand the emotions of others. Empathy is the ability to be able to feel the emotions of others. And then they made an allusion in this article to theory of the mind. And so I started to do some, because I know what theory of the mind is intellectually, but I started to actually do some reading on that. And I think that empathy could be more broadly fit into this concept of theory of the mind, which is more than just what a person is feeling, but what they're thinking, and being able to anticipate the kinds of decisions that they might make because you are in a connected relationship with them.
But these are all hypothetical postulates. The title of the article is on SciPost.org. And the title is A Family History of Depression Associated with Altered Brain Connectivity During a Social Cognition Task.
Right.
And so they were doing some research with an fMRI, a functional magnetic resonance imaging, and they get a snapshot of this particular moment in time of where the brain activity is going on. And what the theory that they have is that, because they take this one subset of data and compare it to a control group, and they say, well, the data that we have is that this person comes from a family with a family history of depression. So when he's doing some social cognition task, which means you're trying to think your way through social understanding of some event. Yeah. So I watch strangers walk up to each other in the corner, smile happily, shake hands. Do I think they know each other?
What do we think?
What's going on here? So you ask me to interpret that, and I give you an interpretation. So their theory is that someone that comes from a family with a significant history of clinical depression is going to have limited capacity in that region of the brain to use that social cognition, that social recognition, and interpret realities. Yeah. But they don't have enough data to make any kind of conclusions. And they say so in the article. They say, it's a snapshot, so it's a theory. So then you come back to the issue of, are we looking at genetic limitations, or are we looking at societal limitations? Is the script that's written for you in your genes or in your family? And psychologists and other scientists have debated that forever. Yeah. We'll probably always debate it forever.
The nature versus nurture argument has gone on for as long as human beings even before psychology was codified
So what's the
into a
outcome on
discipline.
that? Is it nature or is it nurture?
You can't overcome your nature. I mean, if you have an IQ of 70, that's going to be true. I mean, there's not going to
Flowers for Algernon.
well, yes, unless we figure out a way to surgically correct that. But at the same time, you do have the influence of what we've talked about ad nauseum, this whole scripting. So whether it's from the family of origin or it's in a larger context, the system of your community, your church, and your society, all of these things, and your conditioning can give you the ability to get the most out of your
So how
genetics.
rich is the environment?
I would say
And
the
that-
environment is way more important than what your genetics are.
Well, no, but I mean, how rich is the environment becomes
Exactly.
the question.
Yes. Yeah, that is the question. Yes.
In the
And if you hole yourself up in a room and your only interaction with the world is through a screen,
Right.
that's going to significantly limit your ability to be socially connected.
So the article goes on to say that we believe that the first steps in developing social cognition come between the ages of 3 and 6. Then subsequently there's some other stuff between 3 and 14, I think. But those are the developmentally critical time frames. And so it matters what kind of environment a 3, 4, 5-year-old lives in.
Absolutely.
In terms of social environment and interpretation of data experience, data reality. So do you have a mother that's angry and withdrawn? Do you have a mother that's anxious? Do you have a father that's depressed? Do you live in front of a TV screen or a telephone screen or a computer screen? Do you have a dog? Do you have a cat? Do you have neighbors that smile at you when you go outside? I mean, what is the richness of your environment?
Right. And we think in terms of, do you have a mother who's caring, or do you have a mother who's cold? And there's the duck. And while that is obviously very significant, the truth is you could have the most caring mother in the world, but if she's got 6 kids and you only get a sixth of whatever her time and attention is, and maybe less than that if there are other needs in the home that are distracting her, then that can be a nurturing deficient environment in and of itself, even though she's the most caring person on the face of the planet. So
Well, but she's situationally caring.
exactly.
If she's preoccupied by
Right.
heavy burdens, like how am I going to pay the rent?
Right.
Or
But the point
there's
is,
no
what
food
we're
in the
saying is
house.
that people aren't bad people.
Right.
It's just, what do you have to be able to contribute to those children?
Yes.
And if you're in a just survivalist mode, then you may not, and it's not because you're a bad person, you may not have the resources to be able to contribute to those children.
Which is
and that's
why
unfortunate.
some liberals and Democrats today are arguing that the government should provide pre-K education, full-time pre-K education to children between the ages of 3 and 5. That those are critical times for their development mentally and socially. And if you don't put them in stimulus-rich environments, they will suffer
Right.
deficits over which they may never overcome.
And I agree with that 100%. The question goes back to who's going to pay for it. And
Well, we're going to pay for it either way.
well,
If they don't develop those
that's
skills,
what I was going to point out.
yeah, look at the
Is that
prisons.
you can either pay for it on the front end or you can pay for it on the back end, but we just have such a priority deficit or a priority mismanagement in our society. If you're going to pay sports athletes and movie stars millions of dollars, but you're going to pay a pre-K teacher $20,000, well, you generally get what you pay for. I think that is a real deficit in our society. I would love for us to recognize the investment that we would be making. I would say pay those pre-K teachers a living wage, pay them $50,000 a year, pay hundreds of thousands of them that even if that meant that you had to take money from other places and invest in there. You could pay less on defense and more on education, and I think you're going to create a better country.
I agree.
But I don't know that that is the majority
But you still have to pay
opinion.
enough for defense that you still have a country.
Well,
How does one weigh their priorities?
so in the United States right now, as we exist in 2021, let's assume for the sake of argument that we halved our defense budget, because right now we spend more on defense
23 countries.
Well, I thought it was 17, but regardless, it's a crazy amount of money. So if we just cut that in half, does anybody really believe that there is any realistic possibility that we would be invaded by a foreign power over the course of the next 50 years?
I don't know.
I don't believe that anybody really believes that, because that wouldn't happen. So what we wouldn't have the capacity to do would be to go overseas.
Well, back up. When you say that, you're talking about a classical, historical nation against nation war and armies.
Right.
If you're talking about terrorist activities that around the world
yeah,
there
yeah.
are people that hate
No, I'm not-
America
Right.
and will sacrifice themselves to damage America. So will they poison the water system in Memphis, or will they blow up a dam in Tahoe, or will they do something like that? Yeah, there are a lot of people who think that's going to happen.
But the defense budget that we spend today isn't going to protect you from that.
That's one of the realities that Congress and the defense system has to face.
Yeah.
How do we plan for the next war, not the last one?
Right. And if we accept that we're not going to project our force over to places like Afghanistan and things like
Occupying
that.
controlled territory.
Then the realistic probability that the United States is going to be invaded by a foreign power is completely unrealistic.
Invaded
That's
by
not
a
gonna
foreign
happen.
power, yes. But
The real existential threat to the United States is economic. If China becomes the superpower economically, that will affect us. How do you prevent that from happening? By investing in pre-K education today.
that's one way.
That's the best way,
Yeah.
I would argue.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm saying is I would like for people to recognize that you aren't creating a less stable America by investing in education. You're actually creating a more stable America.
Well, but there's so many ingredients to it, Michael. I mean, it's an interesting conversation to have, and it's an interesting argument to have. One argument is that we need to bring drug manufacturing back to the United States and not have it done in China and India. For all kinds of reasons for that. But the medicines that we consume in this country ought to be made in this country.
Well, but then nobody wants to pay more for their medicines.
Right.
And
They don't pay for them at all.
Right. And you can't bring that manufacturing back. I mean, it's just like manufacturing of steel. Yeah, we could bring manufacturing back to the United States, but in the United States, you have to pay people more money to produce that good than you would in China or Korea.
Right.
And so that means that the prices are going to be more expensive. So yes, you would have good middle class labor intensive jobs in the United States, which would be great for our economy, but it would also mean that you'd have to pay more for your goods. Are we willing to do that?
We're not. We haven't been so far. Yeah.
Right. And so I believe that we could spend less on defense and invest in education.
It's a great argument. I don't disagree with your argument at all. The question is, do we have the willpower?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so.
And the clarity of thinking to say, well, this truly is the intervention point where we can make a difference.
Right. I think that the reason why that argument is difficult is because of the power investments that our leadership has that they don't want to talk about, right? So I have so many Army bases within my jurisdiction, and I want those to get bigger, not smaller. And that's how I'm going to run my re-election campaign. But it's not because I care about the future of the country. It's because I care about my next election.
Yeah.
And I don't think...
Or because I could care more about my local community than I do the country.
Yeah.
I mean, if I can keep 70,000 jobs active in Kentucky, as opposed to having them move to Texas, then I want to do that.
And so, we've gotten kind of far afield from the original conversation about depression, but
I don't know. It's pretty depressing.
But I do think that all of us are standing at an inflection point, which means that we actually have the power to control whether or not we spend more on defense or more on education. We just have to vote for people who would actually be willing to promote those agendas, and that would actually take somebody running on that platform and then enough people voting for that individual to actually elect them. And I don't know if that's realistic or not.
Well, right now, the momentum of the system is in a different direction.
Right. And so you'd have to have a seed change at the ground roots level of individuals.
Well, you have one. There are, 32 states that have passed laws within the last calendar year to restrict access to the polls, limit the number of people that vote, because black and brown people are not as likely to vote for their candidates as they would for other candidates, and so they're trying to find ways to prevent them from voting. So we are in the midst of a sea change.
But even that is a stopgap measure, because eventually the numbers become overwhelming. I think it's 19.
Yeah, eventually that'll happen.
Yeah.
But for instance, for the next 10 years, it won't happen because the census.
Because I think it's 2032. Well, I think it's 2032 when the numbers tip.
Well, we're already a majority non-white country.
Yeah,
it's already tipped, but not voters.
Right. But eventually that happens because
unless there's some change in the system that says we can't vote if you 2/5 of a person.
Well, but even if that were to happen, unless the white population starts to have children at a significantly increased ratio, then we're going to continue to reduce in number. And so eventually it's going to become overwhelming, whatever that point is at some point in the future. And so my message would be, if you are brown, if you are black, if you are of some other ethnic orientation, and you really want to impact the system, organize and start to become a powerful voting.
I thought you were going to say have more kids.
Block. Well, I mean, and that's another thing, right?
They're already doing that.
They're already doing that. Right. And so recognize the power that you have. Don't become disillusioned because people are passing laws that are prohibiting your voting ability and then say, oh, well, there's nothing we can do. Yeah. No, there's absolutely something you can do. Stay the course, continue to vote, even though they make it hard, and recognize that at a certain point in the future, it's going to become your country. And so start thinking about today, what do you want that country to look like? And recognize that Michael Mahan was on your side from the beginning. And so when you want to take retribution out on the old white guys, please allow me a place in your heart that is of, that is fond.
What I hear you saying is classical psychological intervention. I'm not finished with my turn as an old white guy. Just be patient. Wait a little while. Your day will come.
I'm not saying that.
That's what I'm hearing.
I'm saying start
start planning for when it comes into your hands.
Because it's going to happen no matter what.
Yeah.
And don't worry about the fact that they're trying to, and I'm not saying don't worry about the fact, but I'm saying it doesn't even matter if these voting laws are more restrictive. The numbers are going to overwhelm at some point in the future, no matter what. And I would rather be on the side of trying to welcome that and work as a person promoting that change than try and stand against it, because the people who stand against it are going to get their comeuppance.
Yeah. I hope you're right.
All right. So if you want to get a hold of us, if you want to propose a topic that you would like to hear us talk about, then get a hold of us at psychwithmike.com. As always, you can go on the internets, find us on the YouTubes, and subscribe to the channel there. That is always super helpful. The music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.